processed food is kind of a popular concept that you're hearing a lot right now, and I get a lot of people who kind of wonder, well, what exactly does that mean? And what are the dangers, and also how does this pertain to neurological conditions, our brain, and particularly dystonia. So first of all, processed food. So I gave you this little chart, and it just kind of breaks down unprocessed, processed foods, ultra-processed. And you'll see a lot of these lists around, but I don't think they really get to the root of the matter, because a lot of times they say, oh, ultra-processed is your worst foods to eat, but honestly, some of the ingredients in some of the processed foods are bad. And also, to let you know, not all processed foods are bad. I mean, if you go back to how and why we developed processed foods, they had safety orientation. They kept food preserved longer so we could carry them longer distances, and some people didn't have refrigerators. It kept food from getting stale. It kind of helped feed the troops of World War II so they didn't get stale and moldy food. So all these foods did have a purpose at one time. In fact, an interesting story I heard is after World War II, processed foods kind of decreased. And so all these companies got together along with Betty Crocker, and they said, how can we keep all this going? We got to use, keep the processed food industry going. And that's when things kind of blossomed into more the ultra-processed foods and making not necessarily for safety and preservation, but for taste and ways to get people to buy more. So I just want to emphasize with this picture here, though, a lot of your cured meats are in the processed food area, and we actually know now that a lot of processed meats are pretty unhealthy, some of the ingredients. And so even though they're listed as a processed food, it's one of the top foods that I would encourage people not to eat. There's one small study related to increased dementia in people who ate more processed meats, increased colon cancer, which has nothing to do with the brain, but just an FYI. And same with even, these are some vegan, push this right, oh, there it is. Some vegan foods, and sometimes people think, oh, I'm going to eat vegan because it's so good for you, but sometimes you have to be really careful about some of the ingredients in these foods, because they can be just as bad. So where do you find these additives? And I didn't give you guys all the slides, but these are some of them that you can find them in. Sometimes you think your energy bars, some of your cereals, you think they're healthy because they're fortified. But these foods are often hidden places for some of these additives and preservatives that we now find are not so healthy. So what is the risk of these foods? What we find is that they can't compete with our healthy microbiome, and of course we now can appreciate that brain gut connection. Also, even though this doesn't have much to do with the brain, but kind of does, the way some of these foods are made, you'll see sugar and fat added. And what we know about added sugar and fat to food, There's a reason those are added, because together they trigger in the brain hunger. So why is it you buy some of these chips and crackers and you just can't quit eating them? Just look at the ingredients, and I can almost guarantee you they have sugar and fat added. It's a beautiful combination to get you to eat more of them. Now, if carbohydrate and fat occur in nature, in certain foods, like certain vegetables or whatever, it's not as much problem, but when it's added. This is where we see more of a concern when you get into emulsifiers along with additives. They can activate inflammation and pain. They can add to, again, poor environment for good bacteria to grow in the gut, and can contribute to alterations in neurochemicals in the brain. And again, we've talked a lot about that vagus nerve. And again, this comes into play with the foods you eat. I also find with some of these additives that people just react to them. I find, gosh, if I eat things with these food colorings or something, I get more pain. My stomach hurts. I get migraines. So these can have far-reaching effects. So again, I've tried to list some of the key ones to pay attention to. And I've tried to give you examples with the bars that I picked out. None of these bars back there, except I think I have a couple with citric acid in them. But you really kind of want to avoid these things. Again, the problem, I'm not totally against canola oil like some people are, or sunflower oil, and people call these seed oils. I don't think they're so much a problem if they're organic, but when you just see them added to foods, I really kind of get concerned about those. But these are some of the big ones, and I've put that in your handout. I've tried to give a couple examples here. This one here. Sometimes people get fooled because they go, oh, it's gluten-free, it's got to be really good for you. But again, you look through here, here's these seed oils, they're not organic, you don't know what quality they are, and then you come all the way down here, there's the sugar, there it is. And then you get some of these leavening agents, which some people really react to. Sometimes people react to lecithin. And natural flavors depends. If you have migraines, you don't know where those are coming from. So just an example of how can you get a healthy cracker. Here's a healthy cracker. And it's just very simple ingredients. Brown rice, quinoa. You know exactly what you're getting, okay? You don't need all those things. Soft drinks, I don't need to say much more. They're just sugar, but they often have citric acid coloring. So people sometimes say, what are the worst foods people can eat? What's the worst? And I say processed red meat and carbonated beverages, or carbonated sugared beverages, mainly the dark colas. Here's another example of bread. We talk about our healthy bread out there. Here's a bread, starts out whole wheat flour. That sounds good. There you go. There's your sugar, more oil. And then we get into all these additives. And they might have a pretty plastic wrapper they're in. They look really healthy. But lots of stuff in here that does not need to be in a bread. Here's a healthy bread, just basic ingredients. Granted, it may get mold quicker, but you've got the real deal. You don't have all those other things. So another way that you can look at some of these processed foods, besides the other lists I've given you, is just look for ingredients that end in OSO, IDS and ATE, or if you find added sugar and fat to the food. This is the super abbreviated formula for avoiding some of these things, whether they're processed or unprocessed. And I think that was the end of my, oh, nope, I had a couple more, that's right. And then I just gave some examples here. People go out, they get nuts, they go, oh, those nuts, those are good for you. Well, read what's in those nuts, okay? And just go for raw nuts. Instead of your processed meats, get your fresh meats. Packages, I've pretty much talked about those, but look for some of those ingredients. Or why is it that when you eat those crackers, you want to eat the whole bag, you know? And often it's those components. Energy bars, they're very deceiving. Again, take one of those back there. Most of them are just, except I think there's one with citric acid. But, you know, look for the real deal in those products. Muffins, big ones. Breads for all of these emulsifiers, these OSCs, IDS, and ATEs. Those are the big ones. So that's it in a nutshell. That's all you need to know about processed foods and which ones are good and which ones are bad. Okay? Mm-hmm.
All right, that's fantastic.